Mark here, another Mark 2.0 podcast. I wanted to do a podcast today, an encouraging podcast, talking about my journey, how I got to where I am today. I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, one of the biggest cities in Michigan, definitely the largest city in West Michigan. And in my late teens, early 20s, I decided I wanted to get into acting. No rhyme or reason why. I just grew up watching TV shows, watching movies, had a passion, and went after it. At the time, one of my favorite shows was the Drew Carey Show. Partially, I think it was because I was working at Sears back in the day, back when Sears was around, back when it was one of the major retailers. But I had a lot of respect for Drew Carey because he went out there and he did what he wanted to do. So I wound up getting into acting, taking, classes at the local community college, which wasn't really my cup of tea. And I transitioned to taking classes at the, really world-renowned local civic theater. I mean, you got to give the local theater a lot of credit because it was unreal. And the classes were amazing. Things like, impromptu, things that you'd see on Whose Line Is It Anyways, scene studies. Anyways, when I was 24, I decided that I was going to look into moving to Chicago. And this was very quickly, within the matter of a couple months. I decided that I was going to look into moving to Chicago. I was always a diehard fan of the city. I love going there. I was a huge Chicago sports fan, and I knew that there was some productions over there, whether it be movies, TV shows. I knew there were some productions over there. So when I was 24, I would say 2005, I wound up moving to Chicago. So I lived in Chicago, and Chicago was an amazing city outside of the cold weather, but I was used to the cold weather in Michigan. Such an amazing city at the time, so much to, take in, whether it be festivals, sporting events, the unbelievable summers. I mean, I lived a block away from Lake Michigan, so I could go swimming in the lake whenever I wanted. And it was just a great experience, great opportunity. Very diverse, unreal people that I worked with, unreal people that I met in the city of Chicago. Very, friendly city, kind of like the friendly confines that they say of Wrigley Field. Not anything like they portray it in the media. Anyways, in 2007, I decided, because there wasn't that many opportunities when I was living in Chicago for acting. TV shows were not there. ER had wrapped up. There was not much going on. And I really wanted to get into acting. There was one film that I did, Wages of Sin. And go figure, I worked on the film and I was cut out of the scene. It was a student film from Columbia College, but it was a great experience nonetheless. And so I decided that I was going to explore, and this was very quickly again, I decided I was going to explore moving to LA because I wanted to work on TV shows. I thought it'd be my best opportunity. So in 2007, this was October 2007, I wound up moving to LA. And did what I wanted to do. I lived in LA from 2007 to 2017. I wound up working on a bunch of different TV shows. And it wasn't anything principal, it was just in the scenes, background. But it was something that I wanted to do, and it was a great experience for me. Working with people that you had grown up, working with on countless, that you'd grown up watching, on TV. You'd grown up saying, I want to be like them. And it was a really rewarding experience. So many different shows that I worked on. One that stood out was a show about a female MLB pitcher. It was on Fox. It was called Pitch. And it was either the director or it was the director of that episode was Joanna Kearns, the one that played the mom in Growing Pains. And one of the stars was Mark Paul Gosselaar, Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. And it was just unreal. And it was amazing that a lot of these other people that I was working with didn't even know who he was. But there was just so many different opportunities, so many different shows that I was on, whether it be working with, and I worked with people on multiple shows. Like I worked with Rob Lowe on one of the shows that he was on with Fred Savage, and also on Code Black when he switched over to Code Black. And it was just such a great experience for me. And I really had a lot of fun going to the different studios to work and I was doing this just in my free time. So there was one year when I was doing it full time, but I had other jobs while I was out there. And what's funny is the other jobs that I worked at when I was out there was places where a lot of stars went to. I'd worked at a CVS pharmacy for 4 years. This is in Studio City. And then I went over to the Sherman Oaks store. But people like Gerald McRaney from Simon and Simon, Major Dad, really great guy. He'd be in all the time. Such a nice guy. And countless others running into them. Amanda Bynes, Kristen from Veronica Mars. Yeah, it was quite the experience, LA. And I must say now I'm glad that I got out of there and transitioned out of there, and everything happens for a reason. But there was a lot of great experiences there. And there was one moment in particular when I decided to go back to college, and I went for business management. And even that, people say, oh, going back to school, doing this, it's not necessary anymore. Well, for the time, I felt it very rewarding. And I was able to accomplish a lot between going to Valley College and transferring over to Santa Monica College. Like, for instance, when I was at Valley College, I decided late that I was going to go back to college. It was already August. So I had to go in and add all my classes. I had no classes. So you go in, you try to add all your classes, and don't ask me what I was doing because for some reason I had showed up. It was either a suit or I was wearing a shirt and a tie. And I'm going in, and I was going for business management. So I was going into these business classes and other classes. And no lie, this professor, and he just so happened to be a Christian. But this professor says, oh, I like your, and I was so confident that I was going to get into these classes. All these other people were like, oh, there's no classes available. I was writing down, believing, confessing it, that I was going to get into these classes. And it was quite simple for me. It was like an easy game, so to speak. And this Professor Earl Neal, who was unreal. I mean, he was one of the first African Americans to get a job in the banking industry with Bank of America. This was back in the day. He was a professor that eventually retired when I left. But he looked at me and he goes, and this was a packed classroom. So I must say, God was on my side. Let's just put it that way. And he says to me, I like this, how this guy's dressed. I was either wearing a suit or I was wearing a shirt and a tie. I think I was just wearing a shirt and a tie. But he goes, I like how this guy is well dressed. I'm going to put him in my classroom. And such a rewarding experience. And so many people want to, call out the teaching industry nowadays because of agendas or whatever it is. But some of these teachers are the most educated, the most unreal people you could ever meet. And you got to give them a lot of credit. Anyways, class after class, I just continue to be able to add classes. No rhyme or reason how I was able to do that. There was one class, what was it? I think it was philosophy. Yeah, it was philosophy, where there was like 20 people trying to add the class. And I'm just confessing, writing it down in my notebook that I'm going to get in this class. This will be easy, And I was like the second person called. He's pulling names out of a grocery bag. And I was like one of the first few people he called. Just confessing things. And it was a great experience for me. I even wound up in my second year starting my own natural health club, focusing on bringing in naturopathic doctors, doing healthy foods, people speaking on against GMO foods. And it was such a great experience. And unfortunately, it wasn't the right. I mean, we had a group of people, but it wasn't the right platform because people at Valley College, most of the people thought, health was, oh, we can have a gym club, we can do this, we can do that. They weren't getting in tune with their health from the type of perspective that I was bringing. But it was a great opportunity, and I had some great guest speakers, and people did come out, got my name and my picture in the local Valley Star newspaper. Not that I cared about anything like that. But then I transitioned after the second year. I transitioned over to Santa Monica College. And it was around that time. Well, before that, no, I had transitioned from CBS, which was a completely, side of healthcare. And the reason why I worked at CBS in the pharmacy is because my dad was a pharmacist. So I thought it was pretty cool to actually work in a pharmacy, which I did for 4 years. So I eventually got out of CBS, was hired at Whole Foods at the Beverly Hills store. Go figure. And when I was at Whole Foods in Beverly Hills, you're running into people left and right. Rhea Perlman from Cheers, Danny DeVito, you name it. Sylvester Stallone, Weird Al Yankovic, David Beckham, all these different people would be shopping there. Simon Cowell, Pierce Morgan, go figure. Kelsey Grammer, who was super nice. Jamie Lee Curtis, she was real nice. And it was a great experience, but I eventually moved out of there, but I worked there for 4 years. So it was a great opportunity while I was transferring over to Santa Monica College, which, no offense to Valley College, I thought was just a top of the line education compared to it. Just because of the professors, I don't know. And there was great professors at Valley College, no lie. There was some great professors, but just the whole atmosphere. There was more clubs to offer. There was more things. They had nutrition classes instead of health classes that only, you know, taught on a certain subject. And it was funny because going back to Valley College, I had a health professor who was great, but she's teaching one agenda. And one agenda they had that they were preaching on is they came to the conclusion that it is a sickness to eat too healthy. There was somebody did a class project in the end on orthorexia, where it is a disease to eat too healthy. And that was kind of like the writing on the wall for me. And it was funny too, because they had, and I'm not trying to get political here, but there was a legendary basketball coach that I went to go and see at Whole Foods twice. She was doing a cooking class. John Sally, most of you know who he is because he's also a personality, but he played for the Pistons, he played for the Bulls. Just a really nice guy. And so I invited him to my health club. I mean, not to my health club, my health class. I invited him to my health class. And what does my professor do? She says, yeah, he can come, but he has to come tomorrow. I was like, are you kidding me? At NBA All-Star, won many titles, talking about health, eating healthy, and you give him a 1-day notice? Meanwhile, you would let Planned Parenthood come twice. Planned Parenthood came twice to my health class. And that's when I knew, you know, writing was on the wall. I explored Santa Monica College, and they had nutrition classes. And they would actually talk about healthy eating and have great projects on it. It was unreal, not to mention the other classes. And then at Santa Monica College, I wound up joining a club that was just phenomenal. It was called the Rotaract Club, which is similar to like the Rotary clubs. They have their own college Rotary clubs where you go and you volunteer at events and you do things. There was like races that we would volunteer at. And then we'd also have a mentor from the Santa Monica Rotary Club. And so, you know, I remember it was really funny because I remember one of the races that I went to over in Brentwood, which is right next to Santa Monica. We were volunteering, and who's over there riding a bike? Barry Bonds. You know, the home run king himself, Barry Bonds. Now, yeah, obviously he was tainted by the steroids, but it is what it is. Barry Bonds is right there, and he's over there, and he just like waving at me like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, is that Barry Bonds? And yeah, it is, you know. And another fascinating story is we went to one of the to serve at one of the Rotary clubs of Santa Monica. He was a business professor at USC. And we went over to his house because he had an event, and we were, don't ask, I don't know why we were selected to do this, but they had us be like the servers over there, like the drinks and the food. Just hang out, you know, and volunteer there. And so I'm volunteering there, you know, and this is a house in Malibu, right overlooking the PCH and the Pacific Ocean. Multi-million-dollar house. And who's there? Who's his next door neighbor? And Dick Buckus of the Chicago Bears, the legendary Chicago Bear actor. And I go up to him. He's just sitting there with his wife, you know, not talking to anyone else, just sitting there with his wife. And I said, Dick, right? And we get into a 15-minute conversation. It's just unreal, the experiences that I've had, the people I've connected with. And you never know what's going to happen? What's around the corner? So anyways, I lived in LA about 10 years, 2007 to 2017. And eventually, and I lived in different parts of LA. LA, when I first moved there, I lived in LA, which was over by Koreatown, over by like 3rd and Vermont, for those that know LA. And then I moved over to out by Woodland Hills, Canoga Park over there. Moved over to Sherman Oaks. After Sherman Oaks, I went to Santa Monica for a couple of years. Then back to LA, and then last place I lived was Glendale, which was a really nice area, but it was just getting so astronomical that I'm like, no, I can't anymore. It's not worth it. And I'm glad myself that I did get out of California, just because it's become so tyrannical, and just with all the restrictions and everything that's going on. I'm just glad, because I'm not into that. I'm not into politics. I'm into humanity. So from California, when they spiked the rent up, and other things I was doing, I went to college for management, and eventually I got into being a shift supervisor at I went back to CVS, so to speak, became a shift supervisor, then transitioned over to Walgreens. And it was great, the setup at Walgreens, because I was working overnights. So you'd work overnights, and then you work like 5 to 7 days in a row, and then you get 5 days off. So when I was doing Walgreens, I could, on my days off, I could do TV shows and this and that. And then eventually with the raising rents and everything, I moved over to Vegas. I had a friend that wanted to move to Vegas. He wound up flaking out, but I still went because it was cheaper rent. And I wound up working as a shift manager at the busiest Walgreens in the whole company. It was unreal. Yeah, it was busy 24/7. I mean, like nonstop. And it was such a great experience. Worked with some of the nicest people around. And that's the thing that I've been blessed with, is wherever I've worked, I've been able to work with some really great individuals. So from Walgreens, I transitioned over back to Whole Foods in Vegas, and then went to Whole Foods in Phoenix eventually. After a year, Vegas just wasn't my style of city. I knew it was very, it relied on one economy, and that was the Strip. Not much to do outside of it. I knew that there was more to do in Phoenix, similar, weather type. And so I moved to Phoenix 2018, 2019, 2018, I believe. And it's been well. Phoenix has been well for me. There was a time, go figure, that I thought about moving to Toronto, Canada, because I had been there when I was young, and I liked the city. I liked what it had to offer. And so I explored it. I actually looked into it. This was 2020, the beginning of late 2019, 2020. I was looking into transferring because they had Whole Foods over in Toronto. Knew that there was so much to do. The drawback I had of Phoenix is that the summers died out. The economy died out in the summers and such. And I explored it, and then found out it was it. And I'm glad, no offense to anyone living in Toronto, but I'm glad that I am where I am. But I found out it was a catch-22, because unless you have a lot of money or some type of big major job title, it's impossible to move there, because what you need is a social insurance number in order to get a job offer letter from a business. They won't just bring you in. If you, let's say if I went to the Whole Foods over there, they won't just bring you in unless you're top management or whatever. They won't just bring you in. So it's a catch-22. You need a social insurance number in order to get a job offer letter. You can't get a job offer letter without a social insurance number. And so it was a catch-22, and I'm glad I explored it. I'm glad I went. I actually went in February 2020 to Toronto for a week. Stayed at a really nice condo, the ICE condos. Many people know where that is, 14 York, right across from the Scotiabank Arena, right over there, for a week. It was like $500 too. It was unreal for 7 days. $500. Plane ticket wasn't that expensive. Of course, it was the dead of cold, the winter, but it was great. I mean, it was a great. I'm glad I went on the trip. Unfortunately, the phone that I had, I lost. I still have a handful of the photos, but I had like thousands of photos from when I was in Toronto, taking pictures of just everything left and right. And some of my phone got messed up, and I thought I had saved them, and they got deleted, a majority of them. But it was such a great experience. You know, this was right before they'd come out, with COVID. Like when I went to Toronto Pearson Airport, all that you had to do was, on the screen, you could say, have you been to Wuhan, China lately? And I just clicked off no. And they were a little bit strict on, they asked me, you know, my friend, they had interrogated twice, which does not surprise me, being Toronto Pearson Airport. But they had asked me, you know, just what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm on here for vacation. And he's like, where do you work? And they were asking me the whole 9 yards. Luckily, they didn't even bother with me. They just said, yeah, okay, you know. They were like, well, what are you going to visit? I'm like, I'm going to visit this. I'm going to visit that. I'm going to visit Casa Loma. I'm going to visit, you know, Eaton Center. They just started naming off places. They just let me be. Anyways, it was such a great experience going to Toronto. And lo and behold, since to this day, just somehow, you know, God willing, I've been able to connect with a lot of people who are in Canada, and they happen to be people who are standing up for freedom, standing up for humanity. Let's just put it that way. And who would have thought that would have come out? But I came back, you know, and like right after I came back, within a few months, is when all this began, and they started, you know, calling us essential workers and all that, where I was working, which was at Whole Foods. And in my opinion, you know, yes, we played a crucial role in getting people food and everything and being open when other places were shut down. But in my opinion, everyone's essential. That's just my thing. I didn't think anything of it. It didn't affect me. I was thankful to, you know, be with a great team. And so I was at Whole Foods and actually transitioned to the front end, which is such a blessing. No offense to the department I was in, but it's such a blessing to work for people that you enjoy working with. And I got to say, I have some of the best bosses around. So I wound up, you know, and there was 6 months when I left. I took some time off and wound up working at getting back into management, working at a candy chain called It's Sugar. And after about 6 months of it, give or take, we all wound up leaving. What happened is the pay was not obviously as great as it would be for what you were doing. They'd offered me a position. I was key holder, which is supervisor, same thing as a supervisor at all other places. The opening, closing the store was very rewarding experience. Worked with some great people. I mean, we only had a couple coworkers, and the couple coworkers that we did have were, great. The store manager was decent. And what happened was, sadly, he had wound up passing away. He was in the hospital, and he wound up passing away with potentially pneumonia, sepsis, and it was a sad experience. But then they had issues finding help to begin with. Nobody wanted to work there. So we all transitioned out, and we moved on to better things. And I even brought the high school kid who was making $2 less over back to Whole Foods when I went back to Whole Foods. And I'm so glad that I went back to Whole Foods, because it's all who you work for, in my opinion. It makes a big difference in your health, who you're working for. People who appreciate you, people who, are grateful for you. And it takes a team to do that. And that's what I see at Whole Foods, and the pay is much better. And I'm someone who's into healthy eating. Me personally, I, enjoy eating healthy as possible. Eating organic foods, eating non-GMO foods, majority of the foods organic. And I just wanted to come on today and encourage people to go out and do what you want to do. I'm going to have more podcasts like this, interviewing people left and right. And it's going to be a great experience. And how I get guests is I reach out to them. The ones that aren't even friends, I'll reach out to them and invite them on the podcast. And they'll say, yeah, I'd love to come on. And at least I'm out there making the connection to try and book people. Because there's been people, I've interviewed actors like John Snyder, and it's just all luck of the draw. I was able to impress his agent, and I get the contacts via IMDb Pro, reach out to people left and right. And I tried to reach out to Nick Baumgartner, and this is no offense to him, and reach out to his agent. And they're like, can we circle back with you in a couple of weeks after he does national interviews? Well, he's not doing any national interviews. And so I said, sure, I'll reach out in a couple of weeks. So I reached back out. And again, they were just the same story. And I explained to them that podcasts are a different type of platform. You can reach a lot of viewers. I mean, look at, love or hate these people. Look at Joe Rogan, look at people like Mark Maron, people like Howard Stern. People listen to audio, and they are tuned into audio. And it is, especially for people who are into like snowboarding like that, you can reach a lot of viewers. They just didn't understand it. It's no offense to the guy himself. He probably never even saw the email. And I guarantee he didn't. And what he's doing is unreal, making the tour. He's from Northern Michigan. He's making the tour at local schools, encouraging kids. Go be it. And another person I reached out to was gold medalist Eileen Gu. She is from San Francisco. She actually competed for China with the Olympics. But I thought and the reason why, and her agents got right back to me because of the way that I wrote the email. I said, look, she can come on, speak whatever she wants on there. And because the media was going off on her citizenship and all this and that, and none of my business. That's not what I would talk about. I would talk about inspiring things, her inspiring career. So they got back right away and they just said, I think we're going to pass, which she's not doing interviews with anyone as far as I know. So that's no surprises. And I was just like, okay, thank you for your time, but I'll go out there. I'll attempt to get people on there. Like when I get doctors and whoever it may be. And then I get friends and I get people that I've come in contact with over the years and get them on the podcast. And it's just going to be focusing on inspiring stories, people talking about their lives. And that's what the podcast was originally about. I started the podcast before, the world changed in 2020. And it was about interviewing people, talking about their inspiring lives. Like somebody I interviewed, Kim Carson, radio DJ out of West Michigan, and listened to her when I lived in Grand Rapids. Such a great, in my opinion, she is, no offense to anyone else, but she is one of the best radio DJs I've ever heard. She is fascinating. Miranda, who's a local, icon in Grand Rapids. We grew up with Miranda, and she does things on the news like family events and things like that. If you'd have to live in Grand Rapids to know who Miranda is. Really, she should be, and she's probably had the opportunities, but she's stayed with, the local market because of her love for it, her love for the area. Anyways, I'm going to continue to do, more inspiring podcasts, get people on, whoever wants to come on, obviously I will have them on, but just, that's what we need. We need inspiration. We need people sharing their lives, sharing their thoughts, and just lifting people up, if you know what I mean. I'm so blessed to have this platform to do the podcast. I'm so thankful for all the guests that I've had over the past couple of years, and looking forward to the guests coming in the future. And I thank you for tuning in. I appreciate every single one of you, and looking forward to some great guests in the future. Thanks a lot.